Hello and welcome back to another episode of Strong Collectors Comics. My name is Jordan and I'm joined today as ever by my plucky co-host Dakota. Now if you're a Marvel fan and you have access to the internet, you're probably aware of a game called Marvel Rivals. This is a new 6v6 multiplayer game where you can duke it out with all your favorite and some new Marvel heroes. Now, I think stuff like this is always cool if you're a new fan of comics, if you're not familiar with some of these characters, to serve as kind of a jumping off point for learning about a lot of these different characters, right? Because there's a lot of comics out there, Dakota, a lot of stories, a lot of nooks and crannies. We've read a lot of them, but we thought we'd put together a list of 5 series that you can read if you want to know a little bit more about some of the events in Marvel Rivals, some of the characters, and dig a little bit deeper into some of that lore. So, Dakota, I think a good one to start off with is a classic series. There's actually 2 series with this name, Secret Wars. I think this is a great pick, Dakota, because Secret Wars both has a lot to do with some of the things going on in Marvel Rivals, and also we're getting a movie, Avengers Secret Wars, in a couple years. And it's naturally, I think, going to pull a lot from these different comic elements.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, there's the 2 avenues you could take Secret Wars. You could go your original, like, we're going to go like old school, get the classics, or if you're like me and you kind of, those older comics are a little hard to read sometimes, you can read the more modern version of it. And then I think, again, I haven't, outing myself as a nerd here, I haven't read the original one yet, but I have read the newer one, and I think from the sounds of it, that kind of ties in a little bit, not exactly with the game, but I think it's got a lot of crossover with what's happening.
Yeah. Your Secret Wars 1984, folks, if you want to go back to those, that kind of sets up your classic standard, all the heroes, all the villains, they're stuck on a planet together and they're duking it out. Classic heroes versus villains, a lot of good fights, character pairings, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to get that foundation, that kind of set the template for a lot of the, I'd say, Marvel battles, crossovers, stuff like that happened later on. And yeah, the 2015 version is a little more multiversal, where you got realities colliding, you've got all these different characters put into new situations and sort of forced to do battle in different ways like that. So I think either of those would be good points to jump into. I think 2015 might be a little more accessible, but it's got great writing, great art, and I think both classics in their own right if you're interested in checking those ones out.
Another one that you can read, speaking of heroes clashing, this is mostly with heroes, but you've got as many characters as, you can pretty much fit in a story. And that's going to be 2007's Civil War. So there are 2 different Civil Wars within Marvel Comics. I would go with the first one. If you really like it, maybe you can move on to the second one, but the first one is the one to go with. This is one of Jordan and I's all-time favorites even, too. So you've got your game, heroes fighting heroes, the comics, heroes fighting heroes. It's a little different than the movie, the Captain America Civil War. But again, same concepts of heroes clashing against heroes.
Yeah, I'd always in high school would recommend this one when people were getting into comics, just because I do think it gives you most of the characters you recognize, like Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, sprinkling the X-Men in there, Iron Man. So you get Captain America, of course. So you get them all together there, and they all have, I think, pretty decent parts, and I think some great art, good writing. So I still think would be a great entry point, jumping off of Marvel Rivals. Another one that might be a little more specific to the plot points in Marvel Rivals, other than just me getting blasted by my nephew 24/7. Well, he doesn't blast me. We're on the same team, but he knows I'm terrible, Dakota. But I would say that is Spider-Verse, and I would go with the 2014 Spider-Verse, because in the Marvel Rivals game, we see some missions where you have the Inheritors. He's kind of that guy with this steampunk-looking mask thing, and some of this spider loom of life and reality. 2014 Spider-Verse sort of set that off, where we got the Inheritors, who is these interdimensional, I guess, family that hunts different Spider-Men throughout the multiverse. So you got Morlun in there and a bunch of those other characters. And I think the Spider-Verse, for me, got a little too wild in comics as we went on. But I think that initial series introduced a lot of those characters, and it was pretty fresh at the time. I think you get Penny Parker and some of those other characters in there. So I would definitely recommend checking that out if you're interested in Spider-Man or maybe some of those more specific missions that have to do with the Inheritors and some of those other characters in Marvel Rivals.
Yeah. Another one, kind of, we had got quite a few Avengers type characters in Marvel Rivals already. I've heard that they're going to start pulling in some X-Men characters. So, story I would recommend, I recommend it quite often, is Avengers versus X-Men, similar to Civil War. You've got, like the title says, Avengers are fighting X-Men here. The cool thing about this one is I think you're pulling in some of those lesser known characters, and you're also getting some variant looks that you don't usually see. So, and that's kind of a big part of the game, is you want to get those variant skins, different looks for your characters. With Avengers versus X-Men, you're going to get like the Phoenix Force type of, like the X-Men that get the Phoenix powers. They get a different costume from that. Magic is a big part of the book. She gets the Phoenix Force. And
Magic,
she's in the game too, which is kind of she's obviously been around for quite a while, but she's not like a A-list character like your Captain America, Iron Man. There's not a ton of stories where she's really spotlighted. So having her as one of the main 5 most powerful in the comic is kind of cool too.
Yeah, I think Avengers vs. X-Men too, and that's another potential sneak peek of the movies, Dakota, because we've heard rumblings. Maybe we're going to be seeing some of that moving forward. I don't know for sure. But yeah, I think that one does also a good job of bringing in, and I think as they're adding characters, I think more of those X-Men ones might show up, and I think that does a pretty good showcase of all those different characters within that story. Last, I would recommend checking out King in Black, and this specific series was in 2020, and this has more to do with like the symbiotes. So there's a couple missions also in Marvel Rivals where you have symbiote things. There's a character named Null, who is the god of the symbiotes, and he was a big part of this series where you have him coming to Earth, sort of trying to take over the Earth with the symbiotes, and all the heroes getting together to fight him. I would recommend not necessarily jumping right into that series. I would start with like the Venom series leading up to that. That was in like 2018 with Donny Cates, which made me a big fan of him, but also I think it's a good jumping on point. Whether you like Venom or not, I think it'll make you like Venom, because it made me... they did some really cool stuff with the characters. So that sort of sets up the King in Black, Null, the symbiotes, all that kind of stuff. And then that leads up into King in Black. And I think that would kind of flesh out some of these things you see in Marvel Rivals that look cool, but maybe don't make total sense because there's not a whole lot of context for them.
Yeah. I could see a lot more symbiote-type characters coming to the game. Like, I could see Null being a playable character. Obviously, they've already got Venom. I could see them for sure adding Carnage and even some of the other like Scream and Agony characters like that.
Maybe maybe you just get some Venomized characters running around.
Yeah, I
never know.
I think I would bet dollars to donuts that you're going to get skins for each character that are going to be Venomized.
Right. A couple specific character recommendations I would have. I know Jeff the Landshark, Dakota, has taken off big time after Marvel Rivals. And if you want to know about Jeff the Landshark, you can go back to West Coast Avengers in 2018 by Kelly Thompson, where Jeff showed up as Gwenpool's pet. So you can go into those. I don't know if the stories are amazing, but I think it would be kind of fun if you want to see that character show up. And then you said, Dakota, there's some other spin-offs with him that have been coming out.
Yeah, if you have the Marvel Unlimited app, he's got his own Jeff the Landshark series. I haven't read it, but it's in my saved things. It looks like, again, it's probably not going to be your greatest story of all time, but if you're looking for just like a fun Jeff the Landshark story, it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to read.
Yeah, and I think as far as 2 other characters that you may or may not know, I have a Moon Knight recommendation because I have heard some people get more interested in his character after the game. I particularly like the Moon Knight series, just called Moon Knight, in 2010 by our guy Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev. Dakota, I think it's a good little 12-issue series, good jumping on point for Moon Knight fans, and just kind of gives you more of a modern version of that character that has some cool elements to it. I'd also recommend, I know we all know Spider-Man, but Spider-Man Life Story from 2019 by Chip Zdarsky is another great one that just kind of recaps a whole lot of Spider-Man lore, different events in his life, and I think puts it in, leads it up into modern day So I think that's a good jumping on point for Spider-Man. If you like the character, maybe haven't read a whole lot of books about him, I think that would be a good point to jump in on. Those are our recommendations for books to read after checking out Marvel Rivals. If you'd like to hear more about specific characters, please let us know in the comments, because there's no shortage of comics we could recommend based on specific characters. Dakota and I could go on for quite some time with that. So please let us know. Please be liking, sharing, and subscribing. And until next time, as always, stay strong.